Sorry.
I want to be very respectful of your time. That's why I'm doing this right now also. But and in terms of this group and the idea of what you've seen nationally in terms of the role of non-tenure track faculty and their increasing role, and I can't help but look at some of the old hands here who know this far better than I, the growth of non-tenure track across the board in the nation. And that is true here also over time. I remember President Henneke was fairly close with when he was here. Well, I said, didn't see that coming. You know, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see the reliance, because that was a group that was supposed to be very, very small traditionally. And now, as we know, it's quite large in the whole country. So your observations on that?
So I'll say two things. I think a lot of people didn't see it coming, but I think part of it is that people weren't paying attention. And so what do I mean by that? So one of the things I did when I got one of the questions that you posed about what's this historical trend is look at some data. And there was a study AUP did, and there are a number of other projects that have looked at this. And I think that their study would say that something like today, or 2011 when the last one was done, 70% of faculty members are non-tenure track, tenure line. Of that 70%, the majority, I'm going to say 50+% are part-time, and then there's a fraction that's full-time but non-tenure track. And that's a shocking picture. If you go back to 1975, when I was in college, I would have thought, okay, well, those are the old days. In those days, everybody was a tenure track faculty member, right? Well, in 1975, 51% of the faculty were tenure track faculty. So in 1975, 49% of the people who were faculty members at universities in the United States were already not the traditional tenure track faculty. I don't think there was any conversation about that when I was in college. I don't know that there was any conversation about that in the country. So some of this is not a new phenomenon, that there has been a shift going back more than 45 years away from tenure track faculty being the dominant person on campus. They were the majority, but they were just the majority back in 1975. What's grown the most in that picture is obviously non-tenure track people, and what's grown the most is there's been a little bit of growth in full-time non-tenure track faculty. That's gone up from like 13% to 19%, but most of the growth has been in part-time non-tenure line faculty. What's the cause? There's speculation. I think economics has some of it. I think a real shift in universities with a focus on research is also part of it, where increasing number of campuses basically wanted the tenure track faculty to spend much more time in their research and creative activities and much less time on their teaching activity. And that, if the teaching burden stays the same, requires a different type of bodies. When you look at the part-time non-tenure line faculty members, they're a fairly heterogeneous group. So this study that looked at how much do they teach, there's a big chunk of them who teach a single class. Who come and teach. In fact, that's the single largest group, and when they ask them how many classes you teach, the answer is 1. And so there are a set of people for whom teaching is probably in addition to their full-time job, something they do either because they got compensated nicely for that particular class, or they have a great desire to be in front of students. And so when I was at Georgetown, there were, in Washington, D.C., John Podesta, while he was President Clinton's chief of staff, taught a class as an adjunct professor at Georgetown Law School. A class, but he did it. He did it every year. Is John Podesta representative? Probably not of any group, but nonetheless, he would have been listed as an adjunct faculty. Then there are, on the other side, the set of people who are teaching 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 classes, and sometimes they're teaching those 6 classes at multiple institutions. And that's a very different person. That's a different. I would say they're trying to make this their full-time job. They're in a very different economic position, and that's a very different reality. And so when I look at the part-times, you've got this heterogeneity in the group, and so it's not one that is easily to characterize, nor is easy to think about. When you think about, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? It will come back to, it depends. If you told me I have a chance to have John Podesta come in the middle of the Clinton impeachment and come and talk to you about constitutional law, would I like that? Would that enrich my curriculum? I'd say yes. So it is a person I wouldn't normally get to see teaching a topic that's hot off the press, and as long as he's an effective teacher, I don't know whether he was or not, but nonetheless, as long as he was an effective teacher, I would say that enriched the experience. Do I think it enriches the experience of having somebody teach 7 classes across multiple campuses year after year after year? I would say, well, no, I'm not sure it does. I think it takes away from the sense, it can take away from the sense of collegiality. It can take away from the sense of community. It can take away from the student experience if people can't put adequate time into preparing, can't put adequate time into the out-of-classroom stuff. The out-of-classroom stuff is equally as important if you're thinking about what we're doing as an educational mission, is forming young men and women. That's a mentorship. That's a, do I get to talk to you for more than 2 seconds after the class? That's a, will you write me a letter of recommendation? Will you talk to me about whether I should even be doing what I want you to write me a letter of recommendation about? And so having a growing share of people who aren't in a position to do that, having a growing share of people, when you look at the life of a department, who aren't participating because they can't participate because they've got to rush off to another job or another university, I think takes away from the campus life. So so it's really, the more it's that second model, I think the stronger would be the conclusion that maybe it's not a net plus. The more it's the first model, I think you don't necessarily want to lose that opportunity. And I'll give another example. I was teaching at the University of Maryland when 9/11 happened. And there was a great demand for terrorism experts. But people hadn't been trained in it. But being in Washington, you could get a set of people who had thought about this issue, who were professionals, and you could bring them in. That enriched the curriculum in ways it would have taken years for us to get political scientists and sociologists and criminologists and psychologists trained and up to speed about what that was as a field. But by having an ability to reach out to adjunct faculty or reach out to part-time faculty, we could enrich our curriculum shortly. So maybe I am hedging because I think it's not a simple answer.